The cargo hauler Meridian's Hope shuddered violently as another explosion tore through its starboard side. Warning klaxons screamed through the corridors, their pitch rising and falling in a haunting rhythm that spoke of imminent death. Red emergency lights bathed everything in blood-colored shadows. Captain Marcus Chen stumbled through the tilting hallway, his oxygen mask secured firmly over his face. The ship's atmospheric processors had failed 3 minutes ago, and now the breathable air was venting into space through a dozen hull breaches. He had maybe 15 minutes before his mask's reserve depleted, 15 minutes to reach the escape pods. The Meridian's Hope carried a crew of 47 souls, 32 humans and 15 Valorians, a small reptilian species that had joined the galactic community only 2 decades prior. Marcus had worked with Valorians before. Good people, quick learners, honest traders, and fiercely protective of their young. He rounded a corner and nearly tripped over the small form huddled against the wall. It was a Valorian child, no more than 6 or 7 in human years. Her scaled skin had turned a sickly gray-blue, and her chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. Her large eyes, amber and cat-like, locked onto Marcus with desperate recognition. She reached out one small, 3-fingered hand toward him. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her. "Where are your parents?" he asked, knowing she probably couldn't understand him through the mask. The girl's mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Her breathing grew more labored, and Marcus recognized the signs of oxygen deprivation. Valorians needed a slightly different atmospheric mix than humans. Higher nitrogen content, slightly less oxygen, but they could survive on human standard air for hours. But there was no air left to breathe. Marcus looked down the corridor. The escape pod bay was just 2 sections away. If he ran, he could make it with minutes to spare. The pod could be launched, and he'd live to see another day. He looked back at the child. Her eyes were beginning to glaze over. Every fiber of his training screamed at him. Starfleet protocols were clear. In an emergency, crew members were to prioritize their own survival. You couldn't save others if you were dead. It was logical. It was sensible. It was also completely inadequate when faced with a dying child. "Damn," Marcus muttered. He pulled the oxygen mask from his face. The acrid taste of smoke and ozone immediately filled his mouth and nose. His lungs protested, and he felt the first warning tingle of oxygen deprivation at the edges of his consciousness. Marcus placed the mask over the Valorian girl's face, adjusting the straps to fit her smaller head. The mask was designed for human physiology, but it would work. The girl's eyes widened in surprise, then relief as precious oxygen flowed into her starving lungs. "It's okay," Marcus said, his voice already sounding strained. "You're going to be fine." He scooped her into his arms and started running. The corridor stretched before him like a tunnel, and Marcus felt his vision beginning to narrow. His chest burned. Every breath pulled in toxic fumes and not enough oxygen. His augmented physiology, standard for all deep space personnel, would keep him functional longer than an unmodified human. But even that had limits. The girl stared up at him, her color already returning to a healthier green bronze. She reached up and touched his face, her small hand cool against his skin. 20 meters to the escape pod bay. Marcus's legs felt like lead. His head swam and he stumbled, catching himself against the wall. The ship lurched again and he heard the groan of stressed metal. The Meridian's Hope was coming apart. 10 meters. His vision tunneled to a pinpoint. He could barely see the entrance to the pod bay ahead. His augments were flooding his system with emergency stimulants, buying him precious seconds at the cost of severe trauma later, if there was a later. 5 meters. Marcus fell through the doorway and collapsed onto the deck of the pod bay. Through the haze of oxygen deprivation, he could see 3 pods remaining. 2 were damaged, their hatches blown. The third was intact. With the last of his strength, Marcus crawled forward. He pushed the girl toward the pod, then reached up and hit the emergency activation panel. The pod's hatch hissed open. The Valorian child looked down at him, her eyes wide behind the mask. She made no move to enter the pod. "Go," Marcus whispered, though he wasn't sure if any sound came out. The girl shook her head. Marcus felt consciousness slipping away. His augments were failing, unable to compensate any longer. The edges of his vision went black, then gray, then small hands grabbed his arm. The Valorian child, barely 4 feet tall and weighing maybe 40 pounds, was pulling him. It should have been impossible for someone so small to move a full-grown man. But desperation and alien physiology gave her strength. She dragged him inch by inch toward the pod. Marcus felt himself lifted, pushed and pulled, into the pod's cramped interior. The girl climbed in after him, and with surprising dexterity, she hit the manual close button. The hatch sealed with a solid thunk. The pod's automatic systems engaged. Breathable atmosphere flooded the tiny space. The girl removed the oxygen mask from her face and pressed it against Marcus's. He drew in a desperate breath. Then another. Color returned to the world. The pod launched with a violent jerk, throwing them both against the restraint webbing. Through the small viewport, Marcus watched the Meridian's Hope break apart in silence, its hull fragmenting into 1,000 glittering pieces against the backdrop of stars. Marcus and the girl floated in the pod, sharing the single oxygen mask back and forth until the pod's own life support stabilized. When they could both breathe freely, the girl curled up against Marcus's chest, trembling. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her rapid heartbeat against his ribs. "You saved me," Marcus said softly. The girl looked up at him. She couldn't speak standard, but her expression said everything. Her small hand touched his chest right over his heart. A rescue ship found them 4 hours later. The girl's parents had survived in another pod, and the reunion was tearful and joyous. Through a translator, the girl's mother asked Marcus why he had given his oxygen to their daughter. Marcus looked at the small Valorian girl, who was watching him with those large amber eyes. "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We don't leave the young behind." The mother touched her forehead to his, a Valorian gesture of deepest respect, and whispered something the translator rendered as, "Now I understand why the galaxy fears you, but also why they follow you." Marcus smiled. "We're not so different, you and us. We all breathe, we all bleed, and we all protect our children, no matter the cost." In the cargo hold of the rescue ship, surrounded by survivors, Marcus Chen closed his eyes and finally allowed himself to rest, knowing that in the cold mathematics of space he had made the most illogical, most human choice possible, and he would do it again without hesitation.